Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Boiler Express podcast. As you see, I'm joined with a couple of guests here. But before we get started, I'd like to talk about our sponsors here for a second. So first will be Cincy Blitz Boards. It's a fantastic game, really fun game to play with your family, friends, tailgates, cookouts. Check out their website, cincyblitzboards.com. Next up, we have Martin Vintage, some great Purdue vintage clothing. Use promo code BXP for 10% off at checkout. And with that, I'd like to welcome in the guys from the WildChat podcast. Here we have Dylan and Adam. Welcome in, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So no surprise to anyone, Purdue plays Northwestern in football this weekend. How are you guys feeling about your season so far? Let's start there.
Well, I know this one over here, he went up to Wisconsin last weekend for the game.
Oh, okay.
He's gonna be really hyped, really excited. I'm going to keep things a little bit more mellow and down to earth. But, I mean, this season just doesn't feel real in a way. You come into the year, you have no idea what's going on with the head coach. Obviously what happened in the offseason, what came out in the offseason, you really, if this team wins 2 or 3 games, you're like, that's successful? Like, this team won 1 game last year, statistically and on paper, worse coming into this year, and somehow they've banded together. They found ways to win games. They're now on a 2-game win?
1 game.
No, 1 game wins. Yeah. They keep on going back and forth. But even then, win on the road, like every time you count them out, they figure out a way to win. Ben Bryant's now healthy. Like, this is a really good moment to be a Northwestern football fan, especially with the news of David Braun being the head coach now officially.
Yeah, and looking at Northwestern's record, it's been literally win-loss, or I think you started with the win. Yeah, win-loss, 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 just alternating. And so, coming off of a win, that's my hope for this weekend, right? Is just that trend's going to continue. But yeah, I mean, you brought up David Braun. I mean, how pleased are you with his performance as Northwestern fans?
I mean, using the word pleased, I think, is probably a bit of an understatement, honestly. What he has done for this program and what he has done this year is kind of nothing short of incredible, I would say. When we were doing podcasts before the year started, people were asking us, what does he have to do to remain permanent head coach? And I don't think any of us really ever had a number in mind for amount of wins, because I think we were so focused on, the team needs to rally around him. Based on what happened, the team really needed to make sure that he was good. And then when we were thinking about numbers, we were thinking maybe if he could get to 3 wins, maybe if he could get to 4 wins. I don't think it ever crossed our mind that 5 wins was even remotely a possibility before the year started. To think that we're 5-5 and staring down bowl eligibility with 1 more win, as well as the team is all rallying around him. The team has bought in completely. The other night after we beat Wisconsin, every player basically was on that team bus, all tweeting #remove the tag. They all want him as their permanent head coach. He's been incredible. He has completely reshaped the defensive identity of this team. I mean, last year, defense was terrible. The defensive coordinator was fired after the year started. Braun was brought in originally just to be the defensive coordinator, and he's been incredible. I mean, the defense is holding teams to just no points at all. Been great. The offense, it's clicking with Ben Bryant. When, Ben Bryant's in there, it's clicking. And I'm just so happy that David Braun is the head coach right now.
And I apologize, guys. I was so ready to jump into things. I didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself and your podcast. So if you'd like to do that, I'm sure listeners would love to know where they can find you and just know a little bit about you all.
Yeah, sure. So we are the WildChat podcast. We're a podcast about Northwestern sports by Northwestern students. We're both sophomores. Ashley Provost as well, who can't make it tonight, also part of our podcast. You can find us on Twitter at the WildChat. We're also we post our stuff on YouTube and Spotify at the WildChat podcast. So yeah, go take a listen. I'm sure we'll be posting about this one on Twitter, and yeah.
And so both podcasts here are actually members of Big Banner Sports, and that's one of the great things about being affiliated with Big Banner is we get the opportunity to do these collaborative crossover podcasts. So yeah, I'm really thrilled to have these guys on tonight and talk about some football. So to backtrack 1 game, you were coming off a great win against Wisconsin. You said you actually made the trip up to Camp Randall. Is that right?
Yeah, I did.
What did you think of just Wisconsin, the stadium? What did you think about Jump Around?
Okay, I got to be honest. Camp Randall has always been a bucket list stadium of mine. I don't think I've been more disappointed.
I'm not shocked to hear you say that because me and another gentleman from the Boiler Express podcast went up there last season, and we had the exact same response. Like, we were expecting this football mecca. We were expecting jump around to blow our minds, and we were severely disappointed. So I'm fascinated to hear you say that. No one else has said that. But yeah, I was underwhelmed. But the campus and the atmosphere and everything was great. But the actual stadium and football experience wasn't fantastic.
I love Madison, and like Madison's a great city, but the actual atmosphere there, nobody was cheering. I get it was a blowout, but even at the start of the game, when the team was like running out, there was no cheering, no celebrating the team running out. It was just basically dead quiet. It felt louder when Northwestern was doing well than when Wisconsin was there. And, we had one corner section of the entire stadium. And then jump around, like, I feel like that'll be a cool thing in the student section, but the rest of the stadium, it's just the music wasn't loud enough. It was kind of hard to hear, and it was just a little lame.
I will say we, as a podcast, got the opportunity to go out to Virginia Tech this year, and we got to see the Inner Sandman, and I will say that exceeded my expectations. So I don't know where that fits in terms of your bucket list and whatnot, but that was awesome. That was such a cool thing to see.
Was your Virginia Tech game, was that a day game or was that a night game?
So it was supposed to be a day game. It was actually rain delayed for 6 hours. So we got to see about 15 minutes of real time play. So only about 5 minutes of game time play, and then 6 hours of rain delay. So we wanted it to be a night game. So when the game resumed, it was dusk, and we actually got to see that night game. But so we actually got to see it twice. But the second time, the stadium was at maybe 30% capacity. Yeah. But it was cool because we got to see the players partake in it as well. Typically, the stadium's going crazy and the players run out during the song, but the players were on the sideline just going crazy. It was awesome. But yeah, if you ever had the opportunity, definitely put that on your list of things to see, because that was really cool.
I need to get out there at some point.
Yeah, so I honestly was surprised at Northwestern's performance against Wisconsin. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to Northwestern. I just the Big Ten West is just really unpredictable this season. I mean, it is every season, but I feel like more so this season. Were you all surprised by what happened at all? Or how it happened, let's say.
I mean, I guess a little bit. I mean, going up to Wisconsin, really tough place to play on the road, and Northwestern came in there and, dominated from the start. They didn't have a punt in the first half. Like, this is something that we haven't really seen from this team. Like, sure, there's been spurts of offensive brilliance. If you look in the second half of the Minnesota game earlier this year, when Ben Bryant just decided to become, the next great Northwestern quarterback and lead a comeback. But outside of that, there hasn't been consistent offense, and we really saw that in the first half against Wisconsin. I don't know if that was a product of Bryant being back after being banged up for a slew of games, but AJ Henning looked good. Cam Johnson looked good. This offense was clicking on all cylinders. Cam Porter was running better than I've seen him run this entire season. I think a big credit was to the O-line, but also like defensively too. Play calling from David Braun. Basically holding a team to no touchdown in a game, especially in an away game. The touchdown happened in the last 15 seconds of the game.
It was like 30 seconds left.
It was a garbage time touchdown. Super impressive. I wasn't expecting Northwestern to go on the road into a tough environment, which I guess wasn't so tough. But and they dominated. It's really a fresh thing to see.
Yeah, and the final score is not indicative of how close that game was, because you're right, that last touchdown did come in garbage time. And I want to circle back on something you mentioned earlier, and that being a new defensive identity. Could you talk about that and what you've seen differently compared to, let's say, last season?
I think a big thing I don't know if it's necessarily what has happened with regards to the identity, but the D-line is all of a sudden getting a lot more pressure than we've really seen in the past. They're really getting the quarterback, causing quarterbacks to, have to throw quickly. And then the defensive backs, coverage. I think that has been the one thing. We're coming into the year, we were like, okay, you've got Coco Azama. He could be a guy. I know you were big on Garnett Hollis Jr., but we really wasn't sure how it was going to really work. We knew our linebackers were great, and Bryce Gallagher and Xander Mueller, but we really we're not sure about how the rest of the defensive backs are going to play, and they've been superb. And I think that's the biggest thing. The turnovers have not been a huge amount, but they've just been really good in, just limiting passes. There have never really been big plays that hurt Northwestern. If there's ever going to be plays that hurt Northwestern, it's really just
special teams.
Well, yes, special teams, but it's kind of short plays, teams that are picking up 4 to 5 yards every play. Northwestern doesn't get burned for 20-plus yard plays a lot. And I think that's the biggest thing. I don't know if that's the identity thing. I don't know if that's a coaching thing, but that's one of the biggest things that I think I've seen from Northwestern.
That's go right ahead.
I also think defensively too, they've just come up with big plays and big moments, which is, I guess, in a way just up to luck. But for example, in the game against Maryland at home, Maryland's driving with the ball late, needing a touchdown to win the game, and Coco Azuma comes up with an interception. It felt like moments like that, or against Nebraska too in the first half. There were a couple of really good defensive plays that led to turnovers. It's been those lucky moments and those turnover causing plays. And I think Northwestern's defense has been really lucky and really strong in really important moments, and it's been a catalyst for some of the success.
I don't know if I'd call it lucky. I'd call it clutch.
Lucky, clutch, whatever you want to call it. It's something.
There's a bit of a Venn diagram between those two, right? Yeah. If I recall, in the Nebraska game, there you intercepted Harburg twice in the first quarter. Was that right?
Yeah.
I think it was the first two out of the first three drives.
Yeah.
And then
I think one was his first throw of the game, I believe.
Yes.
Like his very first play. I got to watch that game. I was really impressed with Northwestern. Just, I mean, not only on the season, but really particularly in that game. And it has been cool, and it's been great for the Big Ten West. I think a lot of people wrote off Northwestern. I'm not gonna lump you all in there necessarily, but at the beginning of the season, with everything that happened in the offseason, but to come back and be you're at 500 right now, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, is just awesome. So we talked about the defense. Could you assess the performance of maybe your skill position players, quarterback, receivers, and running backs, tight ends on offense, and and how you think? I know Bryant's been banged up and been in and out of the rotation, but I mean, even when he's been in, there's been some kind of inconsistencies there. But what's your take on Ben Bryant so far?
I think that it's basically night and day, this offense, from when he is in at quarterback compared to when it's been Brendan Sullivan. And that's no disrespect to Brendan Sullivan. I think it's just their play styles are so different. Brendan Sullivan's a lot more of that mobile type of quarterback, and it doesn't really fit and it doesn't mesh well. Ben Bryant sits in that pocket. He's not afraid to take a hit, but he's a lot more accurate, and he finds guys open. And I think that's one of the biggest things. He's not afraid to throw deep either as well. Bryant has really just made some big-time throws and some big-time moments, and I think he's done a terrific job. Yeah, he was a little inconsistent to start the year, but I mean, you look at the games that he has been playing in, and I mean, that first half against Wisconsin, incredible. I think we converted every third down as well because he was just
10 for 10.
Yeah, 10 for 10 was incredible. Of course, that Minnesota second half game is a game that we'll be talking about for a while. We're down by 21, I believe, going into that late third quarter, and then all of a sudden he's out here just throwing dimes left and right and really just leading us all the way back. So when he's in, there's really nothing I don't want to say I'm not worried, but I just feel a lot more confident about the offense. And then we've got dogs at wide receiver. I think that's the best way to say it. AJ Henning's a speed demon. He can burn almost anyone. He's just really great making plays. He had a terrific catch against Wisconsin. And then, of course, Cam Johnson and Bryce Kurtz. Kurtz was our leading wide receiver returner last year with like 200 yards. And he's really come out and proven himself this year. And then Johnson, a transfer from Vanderbilt, has also been pretty terrific.
I think the biggest thing offensively, though, is if you look at the skill positions, the talent's there. It just comes down to what version of the offensive line shows up. Because in games this year where the offensive line's really struggled, look at Nebraska, look at, Penn State, that's going to be obvious. Iowa, for example, that's another one. Where, for example, Iowa game, Northwestern's at the 2-yard line in the fourth quarter, and they basically try and push 4 times and get stuffed at the 1. That's just kind of in situations like that where the offensive line isn't creating, Northwestern's not going to win many games. But for example, in the first half against Wisconsin last week, this offensive line was fantastic, opening up holes, giving Bryant all the time in the pocket that he ever would need. For example, also in the Minnesota game in the second half, that offensive line did a really good job too. It's just what version of the offensive line shows up, because if there's time in the pocket and if there's gaps for Cam Porter to run through, this offense is going to be able to put up 25 points a game. It's just when this offensive line struggles, it gets ugly.
That just seems to be the theme across all football right now. Is that the offensive line dictates the game, and we're in the era of data and analytics, and everything is showing that the offensive line is one of the most crucial aspects of a team. And we're seeing, especially now, even in the NFL, quarterbacks are struggling and they're under pressure a lot more than they used to be, because guys are finding really creative ways to get pressure on the quarterbacks without blitzing more than 5. And I just wonder how much of that's trickling down, to the college level. So, for Purdue fans who haven't watched a ton of Northwestern, if there's one main or two main or maybe even three main takeaways that this is what we should expect, right? When we go to Northwestern on Saturday, what would you say those are? Is it the coverage? Is it the elite offense? Now that Bryant's back in the mix, what would you say those three things are?
I'm gonna let you go first so that I can come up with some like really weird ones that.
So I'm trying to think, and honestly, what to expect is almost the unexpected.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's one thing that has been consistent throughout the year, and that's probably the big thing. For example, that Maryland game, we're out there thinking, yeah, we're going to lose by 20. The offense isn't going to be able to do anything. And then all of a sudden, they put up 37 points against Maryland. It's the type of thing where they've really been inconsistent. I think one of the biggest things is that, wide receivers get open. And I think if Brian can hit plays and make some throws, then, yeah, all of a sudden you're looking at really a top-tier offense and really just things that can make throws. Against lower-tier defenses, Northwestern's offense really succeeds. And I think that's the biggest thing. Wisconsin, not the greatest defense in the world. Northwestern goes out, dominates. Maryland, pretty bad defense. Northwestern goes out, dominates on offense. So I'd say that's probably the big thing. Really looking forward to seeing what Bryant can do, especially now fully healthy, practicing for a while. Really hoping that, Mike Bajaki and the offensive coordinator can cook up some nice plays. That's probably the biggest thing. And then I'd say linebacker play is going to be huge as well with Bryce Gallagher and Xander Mueller. I feel like that's always the go-to, but they're going to make some plays. They're going to be huge with tackles. I don't know if they're still leading the Big Ten in tackles.
They're up there.
They're up there. They're basically everywhere on the field making plays happen. So that's probably the big things that I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good way to sum things up. I would also note the special teams battle is crucial in any football game. Just because it's almost something that's guaranteed, and if something goes wrong, then that kind of dictates how a game will go. Northwestern has had problems this year with special teams, specifically punting. It hasn't necessarily been our punters' fault, just sometimes protection up front, like literally just causing bad punts.
Hunter-Renner supremacy.
Hunter Renner, very solid punter when he's cooking, but needs to be helped, I think, up front a little bit more. And then I want to throw out another name. I think Joe Hyman. I threw this out last week in the Wisconsin game. He doesn't always get all the touches. He's probably the third string running back. But
I think he's bumped up to second above Tyus.
Anthony Tyus has been running the ball a lot.
Yeah.
But Porter and Tyus are your bigger backs, your more physical backs. Hyman will get in a couple snaps every game, normally on passing downs, and look for him, especially in the screen pass game. A little dump. He is so electric and so explosive in the open field. He had an 80-yard or 75-yard touchdown against UTEP earlier this year. Had a big catch and run off a screen pass against Maryland that almost went for a touchdown, went probably like 50 or 60 yards. If he gets the ball in his hands, finds some open space, he can really make some magic happen. And I'm wondering if Mike Bajaki kind of gets him a little bit more involved in the game plan, just with how much of a threat he is as a receiver.
Yeah. So it sounds like the running back you're talking about, just get the ball in his hands, he's going to make a play.
Yeah.
And you said he had an 80-yard touchdown against UTEP, and to talk about Purdue's defense for a second. I don't know how much Purdue you've gotten to watch this season, but I'm excited to see the matchup there. We have a really awesome true freshman free safety in Dylan Thieneman, who I think he runs like a 4.37, so he's super fast, and he's insane. Absolutely insane to watch play. And it's interesting because we always talk about how you don't see him on TV because he's so far back behind the line of scrimmage. I don't know. Do you guys are you guys going to be going to the game?
Yeah.
Have you guys been to a lot of games this season?
We're both on the executive board of our student section, so we're there.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's one thing I would love to ask about as well. I mean, what's the atmosphere like? That's one stadium I haven't been to yet. I did go to the game at Wrigley a couple years back, but I haven't actually made I've been on Northwestern's campus a few times, just haven't been to a game there.
This year it's been a little weird because we've had, some of our smallest and lowest attendance numbers in years, just with, I think, everything that happened in the off season, but obviously with Northwestern's rise and with the recent news and kind of people banding around David Braun, I'm actually really curious to see what attendance looks like on Saturday. it honestly kind of depends on the week, depends on the game, depends who's at Ryan Field with student turnout and just season ticket turnout. For example, earlier this season for the Maryland game, I was talking to these season ticket holders from Washington, D.C. that fly up every single weekend. They've had season tickets since 2015, and the guy had basically gone to Northwestern in the 80s, was part of the students that took the goalpost down and threw them in the lake. And there's still that sense of really like, we love this team from people. It's just there hasn't been that turnout this year. But there's still there's still a lot of positivity with this team, I'd say.
And I will say that this game should hopefully, depending on litigation and legal things, should be the last game at this version of Ryan Field.
Yeah.
It's hopefully getting torn down in about a month and the new stadium getting built on the top of it, if it gets approved by the city, which it still sort of has not. But so we're trying to make it a big deal, get people to go out there. There's word that if they win, they're going to storm the field and, tear the goalpost down.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what. Yeah, we'll see. Celebrate bowl eligibility. But yeah, it's been tough this year. It's kind of been a library. It has not been the greatest. But honestly, the team kind of fuels off that. They are kind of used to playing that. And, a lot of teams that are used to these crazy ruckus crowds, they're not used to getting up at 11 a.m. and playing in an empty stadium and, quiet stadium as well.
Yeah. I mean, and that's unfortunately, I have seen, in years, I'm talking 10 years ago, maybe, where, Rutgers was ranked I'm sorry, not Rutgers, Northwestern. I was watching the Rutgers game earlier. Northwestern games are, the attendance is very low, right? I mean, they're like 60-70% capacity when, the team's doing really well. But it's good to know that, there are those like diehard fans that are rallying behind, and I imagine with with the coaching change and the way teams are rallying back, that attendance is gonna bounce right back. So I feel like I've been firing questions at you guys. What would you all like to know about Purdue, or what concerns you about Purdue in this upcoming game? Let's start there.
I mean, I guess what concerns me about Purdue is, number one, I'm a huge Hudson Card fan. Really huge Hudson Card fan. Really liked Purdue picking up in the offseason, and obviously it's been kind of an up and down year for Purdue. How would you assess his performance and kind of this offense in a season that hasn't gone the way that Boilermakers fans would have wanted?
Yeah. So, I mean, starting with that very end of that statement there, no, the season hasn't gone the way that, that we obviously wanted and thought. We did lose several guys to the NFL and had the coaching change in the offseason, but no one expected this, I don't think. But we've been in a lot of games, particularly around Hudson Card. I think it comes down to how well we can protect him. When he's well protected, we saw against Illinois. I mean, he looked like a completely different player. We saw last weekend against Minnesota, he looked like a completely different player. I think there was something else going on last weekend. He looked like, I've never seen him play that well. He was making the right reads. He was rolling out when he needed to. He was tucking the ball and running without thinking about it. But I think that, there are some times where he makes some poor decisions, and there are times where he has an easy throw for a first down, and he'll kind of, make the deep throw for a 50-50 ball as well. But I feel like that's been cleaned up. But I think a lot of it really comes down to trust for him. I think he has kind of lost some trust in the offensive line. And Ryan Walters has said some things about that too, about, he has to keep reminding him, like, hey, you have to go into every snap and you have to believe that you're going to be protected. You're going to have to believe you have a clean pocket. You have to believe the receivers are going to get separation. And so I don't know, something happened after the Michigan game where he just, came out and just looked like he had the utmost confidence in not only himself, but the guys around him. So I hope that continues, but overall, I've been very pleased with Hudson Card. I think that Purdue fans are still getting used to this new, true air raid style offense that Coach Harrell is running, when we're used to the Jeff Brom version of an air raid where we're actually passing the ball 70% of the time. So there's a little bit of a transition in the mindset of fans, but yeah, overall I've been very pleased with Hudson Card when he's protected, and when he's not, that's not always his fault.
Obviously, coming off now, I guess a big win, over Minnesota, who I can't tell the vibe on Minnesota if they're good or what they are. But I guess what went right besides Hudson Card in this Minnesota game that let you guys win by, what was it, 19 points or around there?
Yeah, it was 49-30. I mean, well, one thing, we had two running backs go off for over 100 yards each. So not only did Hudson Card play really well, both Devin Mockabee and Tyrone Tracy had over 100 rushing yards. And not only did Hudson Card look, to be reborn, so to speak, the offensive line looked great. I mean, they were physical. We were shuffling guys around at different positions. We're pretty banged up on the offensive line. We're starting some third string guys, but they were playing with just a little bit more, trying to think of the word, moxie is what comes to mind. Like they just wanted it. It seemed, more than anything else. So on the offensive side, it was really the ability to run the ball. I think Card using his feet more and just not thinking about it, tucking and running, really opened up that kind of third dimension to the offense. Defensively, I really felt like we made adjustments in a completely different way. Purdue kind of dropped into a lot more zone than what we've seen in previous games. So I don't know how much Purdue, you all have watched, but defensively, we one of the guys on our podcast jokes about, it's almost like a punt return formation, right? We're just stacking the line of scrimmage, two linebackers, and the corners are far back, but we have one single high safety who's so far back that you can't see him, and we're typically playing man to man out of that. But what we saw is we've been a pretty pass rush heavy defense for a lot of the season. What happened against Minnesota is we were dropping some of those pass rushers back into coverage and really confusing Kyle McManus. So he would drop back and think that he had 5, 6, 7 guys rushing, and then 4 of them would drop into coverage, and he'd throw a quick pass, that it'd hit the receiver in the back of the hands or it'd be behind him. So I don't know how much of that's going to translate personnel wise. I mean, to the Northwestern game, but that's really the two main things that I saw that really had Minnesota stifled. And, Purdue did well offensively, was being able to run the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
so given that,
is
it time for score predictions?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll let you guys start.
I'll go first. Okay. I have not taken Northwestern in a game this year. I have every single one of the first 10 games. I have said that Northwestern is going to lose, and this is the week it changes.
Oh, no.
Okay, this is the week it changes. It's going to be a close one. I think it's going to actually be pretty high scoring. And I think Ben Bryant is going to throw like a 47-yard laser to Bryce Kurtz with 37 seconds left to win the game. And it's going to be 27-24 Northwestern wins in a crazy fourth quarter that has 20 combined total points scored.
I think I kind of agree that this is going to be a fun game, in a sense that I think this will probably be the most fun game just from a football fan's perspective of Northwestern's season, because Maryland was fun. I guess that was a close game.
Minnesota was also
fun in terms of the comeback.
If you stuck with it.
But I think this is going to be a game where it's really kind of close from beginning to end, and almost might come down to who has the ball last is going to. Well, I guess football games typically with kneeling, but it'll be someone scoring with 5 seconds left. Northwestern has had this loss win mentality. I think it changes this week. I think Ben Bryant has confidence. I think the O-line has confidence, and I think that they're going to be cooking. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to be one of those Illinois-Indiana games from last week where, honestly, I could see overtime as well, just because why not? But I think Northwestern wins, sends Ryan Field off on a high note. Students rush the field. I'm taking Northwestern wins 42-35.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be crazy. That's my guess.
It's funny because last week when we were talking with the Minnesota guys, all of us predicted a low-scoring game that was going to be one in the trenches, and as team grinds it out at the very end for a 3-point win, and 13-10 kind of predictions, and but you just never know, especially in the Big Ten West, you just never know. The one thing you said that concerned me was the secondary play, the coverage, and that's been something that against elite secondaries, Purdue's kind of struggled because our offensive line.
I would not call our secondary elite by any means. They're good, but not elite.
Okay. Well, so I guess ultimately, my answer is it depends. It depends on do we get Hudson Card from Minnesota or do we get Hudson Card from Syracuse? So that which Hudson Card shows up. But I think that and I appreciate the fact that you are not so much of a homer as to pick Northwestern to win in every game. I admire that. I really do. But I just to play devil's advocate here, I'm going to predict a Purdue win. And to be even more of a devil's advocate, I'm going to predict a low scoring game. This is a game where defense dominates. Purdue's defensive line, edge rushers really cause havoc. I'm going to predict 17-14 late touchdown Purdue win.
What is the over-under in this game listed at right now? Because I'm very curious.
That's a good question.
Because that's one where it's like, I feel like most games I've understood the over-under, but this game could completely go either way. And I am just so curious what this is.
47.5.
Okay.
So
it feels a little high.
And last I saw, the line was Purdue by 3? Yeah, yesterday? Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know who sets these lines or why, but obviously it wouldn't exist if people weren't making the bet. But that's fascinating. Well, I'm looking forward to a really great game. I do agree in that it's going to be a game that we're not going to want to miss. It's going to be a 4-quarter game. And with that, is it time to transition sports here?
Yeah.
So maybe. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, I know. I forget the actual date, which I'm going to check right now. But here in just a couple weeks,
December 1st.
December 1st. Purdue does play Northwestern in basketball, and since we're all here, we figured we'd go ahead and talk about that one. So right now, Northwestern hasn't lost a game. Is that right? Yeah. So how are you all feeling about Northwestern right now in terms of their performance on the court? What's surprised you? What's maybe better than expected, and what maybe hasn't lived up to preseason expectations?
I think this team is going to give me a heart attack every single game. Like, legitimately, the heart rate's going to be terrible. It doesn't matter who we're going to play. We're going to be in a close game, any and every single game, because this team does not know how to take advantage of teams that they should easily beat. And more importantly, when you go up against a Big Ten competition, I think that it's going to be very hard if we have a rough shooting night. But I think we're going to be ultra competitive. I mean, first game against Binghamton, way too close for comfort. Against Dayton, very solid win. Can't complain too much about that. It was close throughout. A couple opportunities to pull away, but wasn't able to. And then against Western Michigan, that game was just, you were there. I couldn't go, but that game was way too close for comfort. I just think that this game and this team is just going to play in close games, and they're going to find ways to win in close games because Brooks Barnheiser and Boo Buie have been excellent closers this season.
I think that was a similar situation, though, last year. Last year, every game Northwestern played in was a close one. There were very few games where Northwestern won in a blowout, and there were very few games where they lost in a blowout. Pretty much every game it felt like was, within 5 or 6 points. And I think that's going to be their identity. I think that's going to be their identity this year. Of course, they're a good defensive team. They still need to figure out some things in the half-court offense, and I think they've struggled a little bit, really slowing down that game. They also struggle in transition. They struggle offensively, but I think they'll start to click more as the year goes on. I kind of hate the fact that this Purdue game is so early on just because, I really wish they had time to kind of build themselves as a team before facing a great team like Purdue.
And so currently Northwestern's 49th in KenPom in offense and 77th in defense. Obviously, a Big Ten team, you want to see that defensive number a little bit higher. Have there been anything that kind of sticks out to you that are some problems defensively, or is it just still trying to figure out the scheme?
No, I would say two things really stand out to me. One, Matt Nicholson, I think, has struggled this year to start the season more than last year, where he really found a groove early on. Remember, Nicholson didn't start the first 9 games of the year, ended up starting the rest of the way, but kind of started off the bench, really. And I think it's been a tough start to the year defensively for him. But more importantly, teams have figured out this double team that Northwestern really operates. They really like to double team the low post. If it's Nicholson and Barnheiser, or if it's Langborg coming down, they really like to make things difficult for opposing teams' big men. And teams have really worked out of that efficiently this season to start. So I think Northwestern has to, throw a couple different things in the mixer defensively, really create some more confusion, and hone in on some of that defensive rotation, which hasn't been beautiful yet to start the year, I'd say.
And that's one thing I do remember about last year's game against Northwestern were the double teams, and Purdue having a dominant big man forces a lot of teams to double. But where we ran into issues last year was when playing teams who were used to doubling. And so that's why, you all were able to give Zach Edey such a difficult time, in my opinion, is because of that double. I'll be curious to see, how Purdue looks to attack that this season, knowing that's something that you all do regularly. And on in terms of personnel, Boo Buie, in my opinion, is top 2 guards in the conference. He's been a kind of a volume guy. His offensive ratings down a little bit. What do you see from him that kind of needs to get him back to where he was in maybe the previous 2 seasons?
I think efficiency is probably something with him. I think that, he often, when he has the ball in his hands, tries to almost make too much happen rather than kind of trusting the guys around him. I think he's always kind of the guy who wants to try and drive it to the rim himself a little bit instead of, passing it around a little bit. I think defensively he's improved. And that's one of the big things that we talked about towards the end of last year was how he improved defensively. And through these first 3 games, he's been almost even better. I think, a lot of it is still just early season struggles. He's been fine, but for Boo Buie standards, it's maybe not where we might expect him to be. But it's also not like we've needed him to be necessarily, because I think other guys like Brooks Barnheiser and Ryan Langborg, besides this Western Michigan game, have really stepped up and really, served in a role and really helping be number 2 and 3 guys behind him that can really help lead the scoring. Brooks Barnheiser in particular has really turned into the player that we kind of expected him to be with this improved role and elevated role. And I think that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah, so you think it's maybe a case of just trying to, going from a situation where you had the kind of the dynamic duo with Aldish and Buie, and now he's trying to figure out to kind of take on that leadership role, trying to figure out what he needs to do, to score and just trying to learn how to play without Aldish. Is there maybe an element of that there?
I mean, I think so. It's difficult when you lose somebody of Aldish's caliber, who's so crucial to your defense. But at the end of the day, I actually think not having Aldish this year might benefit Northwestern in the long term this season, just offensively too. Last year, I mean, the offense was Boo Buie or Chase Aldish dribbling the ball at the logo for 15 seconds and then chucking up a shot. This year, without Aldish, you don't have that guy who wants the ball in his hands 50% of the time, and really is taking bad looks, to be frank. Obviously, not having him defensively hurts, but I think Northwestern is a team that realizes that defense is comprised of effort and hustle and intensity. That's all things that it's just how much do you care. And this Northwestern team, especially when it gets deeper in the season, especially in a conference play, they're going to care, and they're going to want to defend home court.
And so after Buie, who do you see as kind of that second scoring option? Is it Barnheiser?
Yeah, I mean, it's been Barnheiser. Last game against Western Michigan, Northwestern put up, I think, 63, and 41 of those points were from Buie and Barnheiser. Buie at 21, Barnheiser at 20. Barnheiser's had double-doubles in the first 2 games of the year, didn't have a double-double against Western Michigan, but, I mean, he's been awesome. And from, that 12-foot range, 10 to 12-foot range, back shoulder, fadeaway action, that mid-range game has been nothing but pure this year for him. And it's really something that he's got very big upside in this Northwestern offense, something that Northwestern's really relied on him for scoring, especially in that low post area too. He's just such a mismatch nightmare because in theory he can guard anyone between the 1 and the 4, and that just causes problems defensively. And then on the offensive side of the ball, he can score pretty much at will.
Yeah, and so he's kind of a hybrid in that he plays multiple positions, and he's a guy defensively that has me a little bit concerned for that December 1st matchup. What do you all think of the transfer? Is it Langborg? Yeah. How's he played?
In the first 2 games, I mean, he was awesome. I mean, we were chanting Ryan Langborg from the student section the entire game against Dayton because he was just going off. Against, was it Western Michigan? Yeah, against Western Michigan, I mean, he struggled. He just wasn't making shots. It was plain and simple like that. I think he was making some nice plays. He was in the right positions at times. Just the shots weren't falling. I'm not really expecting him to go 1 for 10 or whatever it was.
2 for 9.
It was 2 for 9. Not great, but not as bad as I was expecting, I guess. But
you got to spot him another shot,
Yeah. He's not going to do that again. I mean, he's going to make his shots. He did that with Princeton. I mean, he really led them, and he's shown that he can be a great option. I think when he's clicking and then you have basically a big three of, everyone, Bowie, Barnheiser, and Langborg, I think then the offense would be a very serious offense. It's just a matter of, can he be consistent with it? I think he personally can be. I think he's been great. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's got in store for him the rest of the year. He's a good shooter, and I'm not expecting him to go for 2 for 9 again.
And in terms of coaching, every fan base loves to be critical to different degrees about their coach. I know, every time Purdue doesn't win by 40, in an early season game, people want to fire Matt Painter. But what's the temperature like in terms of how people feel about Chris Collins? Is the feelings generally positive or neutral? And maybe throw in your personal opinion as well.
Well, I think going into last year, he was clearly on the hot seat. Going into last year, it's like, okay, you get off to a slow start and, there's a chance where maybe he gets fired midway through the season. And then obviously we go on the run we did, have arguably the best season in Northwestern basketball history. And I believe he got a contract extension over the offseason. So right now his seat went from basically being as hot as possible to about as cold as possible. We're 3-0 now. The games haven't been pretty, but they're wins. And much rather look at a 3-0 team than a 2-1 team or a 1-2 team. I don't imagine there's a possibility where he gets fired at the end of the year. I personally think it's fine. I mean, with what happened last year, I think personally Collins is not the reason the team was so successful. I think it's Chris Lowry, one of the assistant coaches that got brought in, that I think has really changed the identity of the team. He really brought in the increased defensive play style, in my opinion, and I think he's been a big role of that. But, Collins' seat is pretty much ice cold, I'd say.
Yeah, I think just to echo that, I think the best thing about Chris Collins is, especially in any media availability that he has or any press availability, he's just so genuine with the media and really does a good job just interacting with if it's reporters, if it's broadcasters, and anything along those lines, and really getting people to understand what this team is about. He has a great squad around him. He's got a great coaching staff, and I just think some of those qualities in his leadership has made this team really successful. The one thing that I always find fascinating with him, though, is it doesn't matter how close the game is or how many points Northwestern's up. He coaches his guys like Northwestern is down 3 with 30 seconds left in every single game. Any single mistake, any single situation, I would say he's a yeller on the sideline a little bit. And that's
he's always chirping at the refs as well.
He's always loud. He's always vocal. It always shocks me, and it's always
not to the Fran McCaffrey extent, though, right?
No. Not quite. But it's always shocking to see that side of him during the middle of the game, and then 15 minutes later in the press conference, he's like sitting down in the press conference and really expanding on questions. And I just think it's a very interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, I mean, I've always he's definitely probably top 3 in terms of my favorite coaches in the Big Ten. So I was curious to get a feel for how the fan base feels about him. I just think that he's a class act, and I like what you said. And play like you're always it's always a 3-point game. I was actually reading a study yesterday about the fact that kind of quantifying the extent to which players start taking worse shots when the league grows, right? They get up 20 and maybe a guy who's been working on his 3, but is not really a shooter, decides to take a 3 and things like that. So that's really good that he kind of keeps that competitive. Like, hey, we got to play smart still, because every athlete's good. We see teams go on 15-0 runs all the time, especially at the college level. So talking about the game, with Purdue, what concerns you about Purdue? I mean, I obviously have my opinions, but from an external perspective, how do you view this Purdue team? And you can talk about what happened in the tournament if you'd like as well. So,
yeah, I mean, obviously it's Zach Edey, and I mean, with Matthew Nicholson struggling a little bit early, I think that's ultimately where it's going to kind of come down to, in my opinion, is can Matthew Nicholson repeat the performance he had last year against Edey? I mean, I know obviously Edey still put up a ton of points against us, but he was pretty much the only offense in that game last year. It's a question of, can Purdue get their guards involved? And I believe that was an issue pretty much throughout the tournament as well, was that, the guard play maybe wasn't the greatest for Purdue. Am I correct in saying that?
So I mean, ultimately, what went wrong in the one tournament game. I mean, and even going back to the Big Ten tournament, was just guys missing open shots. People want to criticize the coaching or the scheme, but Purdue went 5 for 26 from 3 against Fairleigh Dickinson. I think we lost by 6 points. So I mean that's a recipe for a loss. And of those 26 threes, 25, according to Synergy Sports, were wide open threes. So I mean, when you're getting your players wide open threes and they're missing them, like that's not a coaching issue, in my opinion. That's not a coaching issue. So everyone who said like, oh, it's the coach needs to go, or this guy should have been in, like, no, just shots didn't go in. It's just unfortunate that we kind of have earned a reputation now in the tournament of losing against lower seeds, but ultimately it just comes down to some bad luck and some. It's just we've been on the short end of the stick a few times. I don't attribute much of it to coaching, but no, I do think that the shooting was all over the place last year. This season it has, we're only 3 games into the season, but we're over 40% from 3 on the season, which has been impressive to see, but our volume's down. We're not taking as many threes as we were last season. It really seemed like we were kind of playing Maury ball last year. So it was a rim or a shot at the rim or a shot from 3. And we've kind of incorporated some kind of quick ball screen, pull up at the elbow element to the game, which has really worked well against Xavier the other night. So yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we saw, Nicholson give Edey some issues last season on the defensive end. But I want to believe now that we have enough weapons around him, and those weapons are, a little bit more experienced in terms of what they can do, and that they'll be able to bring another element. But yeah, I mean, that's anytime you're playing against such an elite dynamic guard like Boo Buie, I always get really nervous because he's a guy who can go off for 30 in any given night. And in terms of individuals who can guard him, Purdue's been a good defensive team. We're 8th in KenPom right now. But individually, I don't know who could guard him. So it's going to have to be a team effort. But I think the one thing Purdue has going for them in this game is obviously going to be, it is at Mackey. Is that right? That's the first game's at Mackey?
No, it's Welsh Ryan Arena.
It's at Welsh Ryan. Okay, well then, yeah. So on the road, yeah, we don't even have the home court advantage there. So, I think ultimately it's going to come down to how we can contain Boo Buie, and then how Northwestern decides to defend Edey, and how Purdue decides to respond to that defense, whether it's double team and Edey's passing out, and how we can hit shots. So I know you said that you're part of the student section at Welsh Ryan. Is that right as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the game day atmosphere like there? That's another. Like I said, I haven't been to a sporting event up there.
I mean, last year was electric. Last year was so incredible. We were having to turn away students because we couldn't have enough students at the games. So this year, what ended up happening was we implemented this like point system where you go to other games, you can get points, which will help you get tickets for men's basketball games, just so that we'd be able to kind of hold enough people for this. It's been electric. The first 3 games this year, it's been fine. I mean, it hasn't been the loudest necessarily, but I think it might also just be because of the opponents that they've played.
Dayton was good.
Dayton was fine. I'm expecting Purdue to be absolutely incredibly loud arena. What's great about Welsh Ryan is the roof is very low, so all the noise basically gets trapped in. I'd honestly argue it's one of the loudest arenas in the Big Ten just because of that, and because it's so small, it's just really cool.
Yeah, it's really cozy. It's a really fun atmosphere. Just some of the atmospheres, especially for Big Ten games last year, if it was Illinois or Rutgers or what was another good one at home? Those are the main 2 really big ones. I mean, Iowa was good. Indiana was really good at home.
All the home games.
All the home games were really good once Northwestern started winning
chicken
games.
Sandwich.
The students really got into it, and we're really hoping that's a trend that continues with a lot of hype surrounding this team. I think having Purdue as that first home game is both a blessing and a curse in the fact that it really is a good test for Northwestern early in the year, especially the home crowd environment, and to see how Northwestern matches up against what is the benchmark in the Big Ten and one of the benchmarks in the country, really. So I think that's a really good thing. But on the downside, it's the beginning of the Big Ten season, and these teams are still trying to figure out who they are, especially Northwestern identity-wise without Adige, as well as Purdue trying to figure out who it is, and another season with those guards if it's Smith or Lawyer. So there's going to be some kinks in this first matchup, and I'm really excited to see kind of just that Big Ten basketball.
Yeah, it's definitely on my list to get up to Welsh Ryan because after the remodel, it looks like such a cool place to see a game. I'm obviously a homer. I love Mackey Arena. I think it's the best. It's definitely the best place I've been and to see a basketball game in terms of atmosphere and in terms of noise. Maybe not so much in terms of comfort. They kind of pack you in there like sardines, and you don't really get a whole lot of space, and you're sitting on bleachers. But I think it's something.
You gotta love.
I mean, I agree. But honestly, I just went to the Purdue Xavier game the other night, and I'm just, I'm almost 34, and I'm like, man, I'm getting like my back's starting to hurt. And when I was younger, it didn't matter. I was season ticket holder. Went to all the games. Like didn't matter. I was I was standing on my feet. I was jumping. Like the atmosphere. The cramped conditions didn't bother me as much. I still go. I love it. And I wouldn't change it, but it's starting to affect me the older I get. So do they have like individual seating at Welsh, Ryan?
They do.
Yeah.
So like throughout basically everything besides the student section is individual seating, which is nice.
Yeah, that is really nice. Yeah. So it's early in the season. We're still learning a lot about both teams. Purdue has a impressive win over Xavier. Northwestern has an impressive win over Dayton. It's one of these early Big Ten games where the teams still are trying to find their identity. I'm not a huge fan of like playing 2 Big Ten games and going back to non-con, then going back into Big Ten. But I understand they have to have them. But I've never been a huge fan of them. But given that, let's go in. What do we think? What's the score prediction? Are you guys going to predict I'll call it an upset, from a KenPom ranking to be the number 1 KenPom ranked team as of right now. I'll call that an upset, but I don't think a Big Ten team beating another Big Ten team should ever really be an upset. But are you all going to predict the Northwestern win?
It's tough. I think there's also a lot we don't know about both these teams, considering this game is still 2 weeks away as well. I think plays a big role in that. Last year's game just was so much fun, and I love it, and that's going to be a core memory, honestly, the rest of my life, storming that court. Just thinking about this year, I'm a little worried at the fact that it's early on in the year, and I think that's the one thing that's really scaring me right now. I think the fact that it's played at Welsh Ryan Arena makes me feel more confident. If this game was at Mackey,
it's a loss.
It's an easy loss, I think. I think that game in February or whenever it's getting played in Mackey, Northwestern's going to struggle in that. I think the fact that it's at Welsh Ryan Arena, I think the fact that, it's right in between reading week and finals week. So, students are going to should be free, hopefully. I don't know. It's Northwestern. You never know with the nerds. But I think that students are going to turn out. It's going to be a fun game. It'll be a full game. I think that's going to play an impact. I think I'm going to take a Northwestern win in this one. I think last year's game, it was 64-58. I think it'll be a little higher scoring this year. I think one of the teams will probably get upper 70s. I'm going to take Northwestern 78, Purdue 74.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of basketball to be played in between the next 2 weeks, right? Northwestern's going on a little trip to Connecticut this weekend for a little tournament. Who does Purdue have?
Yeah, so Purdue goes to Hawaii. We're playing in the Maui Invitational.
There we go.
So it's a pretty stacked field out there. So we play Gonzaga, and then if we win that game, we play the winner of Tennessee and Syracuse. Kansas Marquette are also in the bracket as well. So regardless, we're going to be playing. We're going to learn a lot about our team for sure.
I think that's a great moment for Purdue to really kind of get those early season reps against that high competition. I'm really worried because Dayton's going to be the game, right? Dayton, that win against Dayton is kind of that, trial by fire. And until you really play Purdue, if Northwestern wins the first game against Rhode Island, is that who they play?
Play Rhode Island.
Yeah, Rhode Island and then Mississippi State.
I think
it'll be Mississippi State if we win that one because they're playing Washington State. I think Northwestern struggles in this game. I think that they lose by 8 to 11, somewhere in there. I think Purdue kind of still shows that they're the king of the Big Ten. And I don't really know what the score would be. I think Northwestern puts up like 62, 63, and then work your way up to a Purdue like 70, 71, somewhere in there. But I think Purdue gets a win. Northwestern hangs around for the game, but just isn't able to make that push that they were able to make last year.
So I'm a big analytics guy, and one thing that I look at, Northwestern, looking at the numbers, is the high amount of turnovers that Northwestern has forced so far this season. Their opponents have a 27.5% turnover percentage, and that's a red flag for me, because the recipe for Purdue losing last season was turning the ball over and shooting poorly. We could do one of the two, but we couldn't do both. Um, Braden Smith is running the majority of point guard duties this season. His assist percentage is almost 50%, but his turnover percentage is about the same as what it is last year. It's right around 25%. But seeing that, Northwestern so far through 3 games has forced a lot of turnovers is the one area where I feel like if Northwestern were to pull off the upset, it would be through that avenue. It would be through, forcing turnovers, especially getting the ball out of Edie's hands. It's the biggest advantage Purdue has when they play against another team is that you can't simulate Zach Edey in practice. However, not everyone, a lot of guys on this team have played against Zach Edey before. Nicholson, he's seen him 4 times now. So I think that's the one advantage they have. And like I talked about, Northwestern can double and does double. One thing I think we've seen differently from Edey in this season, though, has been his passing. He's been finding guys on the perimeter, and the shots have been going in as well. But my final prediction is I think that the guys are looking for a little bit of vengeance from last season, and I'm right in line with you. I'm thinking 70-63, something along those lines. Purdue. Regardless, it's going to be a fun game, though. So like I said, Boo Buie is one of the top guards in the conference, one of my favorite players to watch.
And I mean, how often on a podcast do you get to talk about 2 very exciting games upcoming, whether it be football, basketball? It's been a blast. It has been a blast.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. It's actually a first for us. We've never gotten to talk football and basketball with a crossover collaboration. So that's awesome that that the timing of the games works out so that we were able to talk about this. And I don't know about you all, but it's like our agenda is getting pretty packed as we like transition and that kind of overlap in football and basketball. So it's like we have to schedule everything out. And like, all right, we're going to talk about football for 10 minutes and then upcoming game for 10 minutes. And we're into basketball. And we got 3 games to cover. And yeah, that's all that.
We gotta get a better schedule for us going,
yeah.
but
we try the schedule, but we mostly just end up winging it. Just the conversation comes. We normally have to like cap it because there's so many things we want to talk about. Got a listener comment here. Frank, you're so handsome. Well, thank you, Dylan. I appreciate that. It's one of the Boiler Express crew right there. That's who that is. Yeah,
love to see it.
Yeah. Well, unless there's anything else, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. We're right at that hour mark. So, is there anything else you guys wanted to add?
I think we've said it all.
I'm good. Go Cats.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate, again, this is Dylan and Adam from the WildChat podcast. Really appreciate you all taking the time to come on this evening and talk with us. It's been a pleasure, and really look forward to future collaborations with you all.
Same here.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for stopping by, and we'll go ahead and end this now. And for those of you watching, again, be sure to check us out, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. You can find us at Boiler Express Podcast. And if you guys want to drop your socials one more time for the listeners, we can sign off after that.
Yeah, sure. You can find us at the WildChat on Twitter. We're thinking about maybe getting an Instagram running soon if Ashley wants to take the charge on that one. Besides that, we're on YouTube and Spotify at the WildChat Podcast as well, posting all of our podcasts over there. And yeah.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for listening.